Welcome to Capital Catch-Up, your go-to source for in-depth discussions on what is happening in Congress. I am Victor.
And I am Leni. Today we are diving into a wide array of recently introduced bills, resolutions, and procedural moves shaping federal policy. We will look at how these pieces of legislation could impact everyday Americans, from digital privacy and energy bills to environmental cleanups and government transparency.
Let us start with a significant procedural move in the Senate. Senate Resolution 817 authorizes the en bloc consideration of 74 executive nominations on the executive calendar. For our listeners who might not be familiar with the term, en bloc is a legislative procedure that allows the Senate to group multiple nominations together for a single vote, rather than debating and voting on each one individually.
Exactly, Victor. This list of 74 nominees is extensive and covers critical roles across the federal government. We are talking about numerous ambassadors to foreign nations, United States attorneys, U.S. Marshals, and leadership positions within major federal agencies like the Departments of State, Treasury, Justice, Homeland Security, and Agriculture. It also includes nominees for the National Labor Relations Board and the District of Columbia court system. The primary goal here is to expedite the confirmation process to efficiently fill these essential administrative, judicial, and diplomatic vacancies.
Moving from government staffing to the digital landscape, let us look at two major bills targeting big tech and consumer control. First is Senate Bill 5007, also known as the Search Act of 2026. This bill aims to curb the market dominance of major digital platforms and restore competition in online search and advertising. It targets large covered platforms with massive user bases, prohibiting them from exclusionary conduct like self-preferencing, restrictive exclusive agreements, and using default settings to stifle competitors.
That is a big deal for consumers who want more choices. Senate Bill 5007 mandates that these dominant platforms share data with qualified competitors and implement choice screens, allowing users to easily select their preferred search engines. It also requires dominant platforms to license their search results and add inventory to competitors at marginal cost. This is designed to foster a more open digital ecosystem, increase transparency for advertisers, and make sure generative AI and search technologies stay accessible to a broader range of market participants. The Federal Trade Commission would have strict oversight over platform acquisitions and investments under this bill.
Right alongside that is Senate Bill 5051, the AI Agent Act of 2026. This bill also focuses on online platforms, but from a user empowerment angle. It allows users to authorize software-based tools called custodial user agents to manage their interactions, data, and account settings on large platforms with over 50 million monthly users. These platforms must provide secure, transparent, and non-discriminatory interfaces for these agents to operate.
This could really shift control from platform gatekeepers back to individual users. The AI Agent Act of 2026 sets up a strict regulatory framework under the Federal Trade Commission. Providers of these custodial agents must register and adhere to rigorous privacy, security, and fiduciary-like duties, including a strict ban on selling user data for secondary commercial purposes. The National Institute of Standards and Technology is directed to develop open protocols for interoperability, and the Federal Trade Commission will enforce these rules to ensure user delegation is verifiable, revocable, and protected from anti-competitive interference.
Now, let us talk about government transparency and accountability. There are two matching bills called the Epstein Files Transparency Act 2, which are Senate Bill 5005 and House Resolution 9694. These bills are designed to strengthen the enforcement of the original act by giving state attorneys general, district attorneys, and victims expanded legal standing to challenge the federal government when it withholds or redacts investigative records.
Yes, they can seek judicial relief in federal court to compel the disclosure of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and their criminal network. Crucially, the legislation explicitly prohibits the Department of Justice from invoking common law privileges, such as attorney-client or deliberative process privileges, to block access to these files. It also establishes a streamlined process for congressional access to unredacted files, mandates expedited judicial review for these lawsuits, and imposes potential criminal penalties for federal officials who falsify, destroy, or unlawfully conceal records. Under House Resolution 9694, victims specifically get a right to access unredacted records related to their own cases, ensuring state-level law enforcement can use these documents in ongoing proceedings without federal administrative hurdles.
Another transparency-focused bill is Senate Bill 4355, the Drug Deal Disclosure Act, introduced by Senator Ron Wyden and a bipartisan group of co-sponsors. This bill targets private drug pricing agreements between the federal government and major pharmaceutical manufacturers. It mandates that the Department of Health and Human Services publicly release all documentation, contracts, and communications related to most favored nation pricing deals and other confidential arrangements made since January 20, 2025.
The bill specifically prohibits withholding this information due to political sensitivity or reputational concerns. It also directs the Congressional Budget Office and the Government Accountability Office to conduct a comprehensive analysis of how these private deals economically and budgetarily impact Medicare, Medicaid, and the wider U.S. healthcare market.
Let us shift our focus to environmental cleanup and community revitalization. We have 3 bills addressing brownfields, which are contaminated properties. First is House Resolution 6432, the Brownfields Reauthorization Act of 2025, introduced by Representatives Sharice Davids and Brian Fitzpatrick. It proposes to increase the maximum remediation funding per site from $500,000 to $1 million and raises the annual authorization for brownfields revitalization grants to $250 million for fiscal years 2026 through 2030.
Then we have Senate Bill 347, also named the Brownfields Reauthorization Act of 2025. This bill focuses on modernizing and extending federal funding through 2030, with a specific emphasis on helping small and disadvantaged communities. It increases individual grant limits to $1 million per site, lowers matching share requirements, and mandates that the Environmental Protection Agency streamline the application process. It also expands eligibility to include certain 501c6 organizations and Alaska Native corporations.
To build on that, House Resolution 8739, the Brownfields Revitalization for a Better Tomorrow Act, introduces updates to the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act of 1980. It increases funding caps, expands eligibility to certain nonprofits, and allows a portion of the funds to be used for demolition activities. It prioritizes projects on former military installations, mandates biennial audits by the Environmental Protection Agency Inspector General, and introduces non-competitive technical assistance grants for small and disadvantaged communities. It also requires studies and new guidance to streamline permitting and environmental reviews.
Speaking of infrastructure, let us look at House Resolution 9335, the Advanced Transmission Technology to Reduce Rates Act. This bill aims to modernize the U.S. electrical grid. It directs the Secretary of Energy to establish a public clearinghouse for advanced transmission technologies, providing data on project funding, infrastructure efficiency, and cost-benefit analyses to help utilities, transmission organizations, and state regulators. To speed up adoption, it exempts related federal funding actions from certain National Environmental Policy Act requirements and incorporates transmission deployment into state energy conservation plans. It also mandates national best practices for wildfire mitigation related to the bulk power system, though it clarifies that the Secretary of Energy cannot mandate that private utilities use these technologies.
And on the topic of energy, we have House Resolution 6529, the Protecting Families from AI Data Center Energy Costs Act. This bill addresses the rising energy costs driven by high-demand facilities like artificial intelligence data centers. It mandates that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission convene a technical conference within 90 days of enactment with industry experts, regulators, and consumer advocates to develop rate structures that protect residential and small commercial utility customers. Following the conference, the Commission must submit a report to Congress with actionable recommendations to ensure everyday consumers do not face unfair utility bill increases.
That is incredibly relevant as AI technology continues to expand. Now let us look at funding for Congress itself. House Resolution 9010 outlines the appropriations for the legislative branch for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2027. It allocates funding for the House of Representatives, Joint Committees, the Capitol Police, the Congressional Budget Office, and the Architect of the Capitol. It funds salaries, intern compensation, security, and facility maintenance, while mandating that any unused representational allowances go toward reducing the federal deficit or debt.
This appropriations bill also includes notable policy provisions. It strictly prohibits purchasing information technology equipment from specific Chinese-affiliated entities, requires in-person workplace misconduct training for members under investigation, and contains directives to ensure cybersecurity assistance maintains the constitutional integrity of the legislative branch.
We also have House Resolution 7970, the Stop Netizines Act. This bill permanently classifies two benzimidazole opioids, known as nitazines, as Schedule I controlled substances under the Controlled Substances Act, transitioning them from temporary status to permanent federal regulation. The Attorney General must issue implementing rules within 1 year, using an interim final rule process to ensure swift enforcement, while still allowing for public comments and hearings.
Finally, we have two commemorative and international measures. Senate Bill 5123, the Lunar Landing Day Act, officially designates July 20th as Lunar Landing Day to commemorate the historic 1969 Apollo 11 moon landing, encouraging educational activities to honor the achievement and inspire future space exploration.
And House Resolution 1451 expresses formal support for Charleston, South Carolina, to host the 2027 annual meeting of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe Parliamentary Assembly. This would be the first time the United States has hosted the Assembly since 2005, and the resolution notes that hosting in Charleston would serve as a tribute to the late Senator Lindsey Olin Graham.
As we wrap up today's episode, here is what listeners should watch out for. Keep an eye on how the Senate moves forward with the en-bloc confirmation vote of those 74 executive nominees. Also, watch for progress on the digital platform bills, the energy cost protections regarding AI data centers, and the upcoming debate over the legislative branch appropriations for fiscal year 2027.
Thank you for tuning in to Capital Catch-Up. We will see you next time.